Welcome back to the Fine Print, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Caleb Teskey. I'm joined again by Ben Wilcox from Offpistefarm in Sutton for part two. Now, you said you learned how to grow in California. I know our legislators in Vermont have used some of these other states as sort of a reference model for how we should shape our market here. Can you provide a little bit of insight into how much different the scale of operation is in a state like California as opposed to Vermont?
Oh man, California's got mega sized operations, the biggest, huge. Agriculture in general, it's the third biggest industry in the state of California, which is something like, it's in like the top 10 for GDPs in the world. It's just a mega state, with tons of people, huge amount of land area, and tons of industry and agriculture. Really good growing climate. That's the reason why agriculture is so big there. It's good weather and good climate. So, but yeah, Vermont's totally different. We're way smaller scale, and it's Vermont almost feels like a county in Northern California would,
I was gonna say there's probably some towns bigger than Vermont out there.
Yeah, a lot of like the Northern California counties are pretty they're actually probably more sparsely populated than Vermont is, to be honest, but there's a lot of county identity, like there is similar to state identity here in New England.
Yeah, sure.
Out there it's like county identity, I guess you could say, but yeah, but then there's just huge agriculture in the Central Valley too, and tons of produce comes out of California.
What size are you talking about in terms of these grows, in terms of like square footage?
Oh, there's grows that are huge. I couldn't put exact numbers on it, but would definitely blow anything in Vermont out of the water. I know there was sometimes on the news out there, you hear about the cartel grows getting busted where they have millions of plants, and they're growing in like these remote canyons that are stretched for miles and miles and miles, and they find like a little camp where two guys were camped out or living, and but they never find the guys. That was kind of the funny thing. They never find them. Nobody's ever apprehended. It's rare, very rare, like, because when they come in with helicopters and stuff, and the guys can hear them coming for miles, and they're gone, like they run away. But they destroy the plants. Yeah, they destroy the plants for sure.
Talk a little bit about, did you have to make any adjustments in your style coming from California and out here? I assume there must have been a bit of a learning curve as you dealt with like the new environment.
Oh, definitely. Vermont, I moved out here and didn't really know much about it at all. I'm still a pretty beginner grower as far as I would say. I keep learning every year as much as I did the year before. It's like there's always something new I have never seen before, a new challenge, a new problem, and it's part of what I like about it is just always learning and overcoming the challenges, trying to anyways. But yeah, there's it's a shorter growing season here by a lot, and longer winters, colder into spring too. I don't know. Yeah, shorter on both ends by a lot. So
for sure. What kind of soil are you using? I've been hearing people talk about this living soil, no-till soil.
Yeah.
I don't really know anything about that, but like, what is your setup involve?
Well, basically, as an outdoor cultivator, I'm using my native field soil that has been amended with compost from my neighbor, which is he gets it from a local dairy farm that has old silage that they don't want to feed to their cows anymore, but he'll take it home and compost it for years. It's like 7 years old by the time he's done, full of worms, and I've had it tested before. There's no heavy metals. It's really high potency. And so I mix that in with my native soil. And the living soil thing, I think if you're an outdoor cultivator, your soil's already living. It's not.
Okay.
You're trying to encourage. You're trying to encourage those things by adding organic nutrients or amendments or compost. That's kind of the idea behind adding compost, is it's just full of all all those organisms and stuff.
Good stuff.
Yeah. But so people indoor are trying to basically replicate the same thing, which is kind of,
Okay.
I guess how I always have looked at most indoors, you're trying to, for the most part, replicate ideal outdoor conditions. There's the nice thing about the indoors, you do have complete control of the environment, but it's never as good as ideal outdoor conditions. But then, sometimes outdoor, it's not as ideal, and there's nothing you can do about that either. But
is the sun still the superior lighting system?
No question. Nothing can replicate the sun besides the sun, That's how the plants have evolved.
Well, I've seen a lot of indoor guys. Some of them are still using the high pressure sodium lights. Some of them have moved to the LED lights.
Yeah.
But and a lot of people don't like smoking outdoor. I've talked to so many people, they don't like smoke. I love it. My friends grew some of the best outdoor. I brought it down to Massachusetts, and these kids thought it was indoor. They had no idea, and I tricked them because they kept complaining that outdoor sucks. And I brought some down, and they were just like, "Wow, this is amazing!" I'm like, yeah, that's outdoor. They're like, you son of a bitch! Like, yeah, I don't understand the holdup. But now
I think it's.
Go ahead.
I think it's because for a long time, when cannabis was so illegal, which it really still technically is under federal law, you had to hide your outdoor plants in remote locations that maybe weren't as ideal for cultivation. But as soon as you can grow them in ideal cultivation areas outdoors and tend to them on a regular basis, I mean, people used to hike through the mountains and woods to get to their plants and whatnot, hide them.
True.
Indoor, you can control all that stuff. So you can produce consistently really high quality indoor, year round. But, I think under ideal good outdoor growing conditions, you can still produce really good outdoor. And there's something about it that it's, similar to when you have a ripe tomato in September versus one that's been bought at the store, or a hydroponically grown tomato. It's just, you can still have really good ones, but, and I've had some good indoor grown tomatoes, but not quite the same as a sun ripened one,
Can you do hydro outdoors?
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't think anybody, I haven't heard of that before.
Okay, cool. This stuff is
Probably
a real blind spot in my knowledge base, so I'm curious. I wanted to say, you did. I met you at the Headies back whenever that was last month, and you were carrying a shiny gold cup with you. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was kind of unexpected thing, but won a trophy for CBD flower, and that was a cross. I'd been kind of experimenting here with making seeds over the last few summers, trying to learn about that just by basically trial and error, like you said before, trial and error. And I was finally able, after had a couple good summers in a row of making successful seeds, and that was a cross that I'd made, and that one won first place for CBD dominant flower.
Oh, cool. That was your own little experiment.
It was an experiment, yeah.
Where do you get seeds? Is there seed companies in Vermont local? It doesn't seem like there's a lot of them here. I've been looking for some, but
I've gotten really good hemp seeds from Northern Roots Nursery in years past, and it's Ryan Pod. And he's given me good feminized hemp seeds that produced really well. So I would recommend point people towards them for local hemp seeds.
Cool. Noted.
Sherpa Seeds is a really good seed breeder out of Irisburg too, that if you can link up with them at some events, there's sometimes that look for them at your local cannabis events, because if they're there, you definitely want to get some of their seeds. And then
Irisburg's right down the road. That's a half hour from me.
Yeah. Forbin student Nick Matei has given me some really good clones in the past that have produced really well outdoors.
Is that going to be allowed? Do you know where we landed on the clone thing?
As far as what?
Well, I thought for a while they weren't going to let people bring their own genetics in, because then they couldn't do the seed to sale tracking. I don't remember. I know they were. a lot of people like Nick was talking about how they should have this nursery license so that people can, you know,
Yeah.
Do it like that, because otherwise nobody's going to have anything ready to go. You have to start fresh from seeds, and
Yeah.
that's going to be a whole however many extra months to get your shit off the ground, really.
Oh, big time. Yeah, it's kind of always, I think anytime any cannabis has come out of prohibition to a legalized state, that's always a major question is, well, how are you supposed to get seeds or plants when it's illegal? It's so at some point you have to have just like on paper, kind of immaculate conception, like a, Virgin Mary birth of your plants that just, oh shit, I've got these plants all of a sudden, and those are yours. But I haven't heard what the track and trace actual protocols are, to be
Is that
honest.
something you support, the track and trace?
I think it's really important for consumer safety, definitely. I mean, the whole point of one of the major reasons for having a regulated market is for consumer safety, I think. And so track and trace is important for that, definitely.
And so you said you were working on producing your own seeds for a little while. Tell me a little bit about that, because I don't know the first fucking thing about that.
Well, it's not very difficult to produce seeds, but it's pretty difficult to make seeds that have what you want in them. You know what I mean? There's the difference there. I mean, a lot of people make seeds by accident. It's you have to have a male plant and a female plant, and the male plant produces pollen and the female plant produces flower. And when the pollen hits the female plant, she produces seeds. It's an annual plant that dies every year. And basically, they start from volunteers in the spring under the wild or whatever, as you could say. They would start from volunteers and then exist to produce more seeds and die, and those seeds would fall down and then grow again the next summer, the next fall, next spring. So to make your own seeds, you have to select like a female that you want to pollinate that has traits you want, and then a male too that has good traits. And so
it's like dog breeding.
It's like dog breeding. Totally. It's exactly like that. Dog breeding, like breeding anything, and you just kind of experiment around with it,
And so how do you find out what's in the seed at the end? Do you have to grow it, or can you have it tested for certain qualities?
The only way that I've done it is by growing it. So yeah, it takes kind of a long-term project that takes years.
Like iterations.
Like one crop a summer, I'm always just doing it outdoors. And so it takes, but I was fortunate to get some really good starting seeds from those companies I mentioned earlier that produce good genetics.
And what's I hear like feminized seeds. That's what you want, right? How do you produce a feminized seed?
That's something that I've never done before, but I am interested in trying at some point, because the labor savings of starting a lot of plants using feminized seed is considerable. And you spray something. So I've learned about it a little bit, just read about it, but you spray something called colloidal silver on the plants, that the females, as they're flowering or just beginning to flower, or maybe towards the end of veg. You do it indoors generally, and it causes it to hermaphrodite, produce pollen, which can then be used to pollinate other female plants. Because it's pollen that comes from a female plant, it doesn't have a male chromosome. So then that pollen with the female flower, there's two female chromosomes, produce female seeds.
So they're like forced into a sex change, sort of.
I guess somehow. Yeah, and I'm not exactly sure how that works or what happens there, but that's from what I understand of how it's done. And I've grown feminized seeds before, CBD plants, and they do really well and are vigorous, and I haven't had really any issues with hermaphroditing out of feminized seeds like some people have. But
can you sell? There's no license to sell seeds or produce them either.
You could,
right?
Well, I think you can produce seeds for yourself.
Right.
As a cultivator, you're growing plants. Whether you can grow some males too. it's like a dairy farmer who keeps a bull around to keep getting more calves,
Roger. Yeah.
You're just moving your bull into the pen when the cows are in heat, to get more calves, same thing.
But it seems like we should have someone like, I mean, if we're going to do this thing in Vermont, we should have people set up to produce those, it seems like that's one.
Oh yeah, nursery. I mean, I'm all about nursery licenses, definitely. I mean, if that's what you're asking, I think for sure there's a total segment of the market that could be dedicated, just like anywhere you see nurseries and greenhouses. Right. People are selling started plants all over. I mean, starting plants is a lot of work, and you have to have a certain amount of resources and setup and space, and not every home gardener wants to deal with starting their own plants. A lot of home gardeners just want to buy a started flat of 6 plants for their tomatoes and their cucumbers, and there could be selling, again, directly to consumer. I don't see a reason why a cultivator couldn't sell a 6-pack of vegetated plants to a home grower, because that's what you're allowed to grow is 6 plants. Anyone
that's a great
unlicensed.
Yeah, spot on. Let me ask you about the packaging a little bit, because this has been kind of a hot button issue, man. I see a lot of people. I see some glass coming into play, some plastic top glass, like Forbin's. He's got the, with the ocean reclaimed plastic, which I thought was cool. Now the board originally I thought was going to allow some plastic, and then they said, "Oh, we don't want to allow any plastic." But it does kind of seem like making packaging with no plastic is a fucking big challenge and cost prohibitive challenge. What do you like to package with, and have you explored a lot of options? Or
it's definitely it creates an extra challenge cost wise, and for packaging, there's no question about that, which can either be absorbed by the packager or passed on to the consumer, but someone's going to pay for it. I'm definitely not in favor of plastic, and I think that we should be trying to wean ourselves off of plastic as a society. But yeah, a lot of packaging does involve some amount of plastic, and I think they said you could use biodegradable plastic. So,
okay,
which is, I'm sure, still more expensive, but at least compostable in a large scale facility, Casella size facility probably. But yeah, I've always either packaged. I have used plastic for large wholesale quantities. I've used turkey bags a lot in the past, or vacuum seal bags, and smaller quantities. I always like to use reusable glass jars. Mason jars are one of my favorites, or some sort of tiny jar that can be used for something else. And who doesn't like having some mason jars around? Nobody ever. Yeah. So
they're everywhere.
And that's what I've tried to use for smaller quantities, is mason jar type packaging.
Yeah, the requirements seem very strict. Like, oh, it's got to be
strict,
child resistant, tamper proof.
Yeah.
If you've got 10 servings in there, you have to open and close it 10 times without the package like breaking.
Yeah.
I'm glad they rolled back the thing. They said opaque had to be opaque. I think they rolled that back for flour at least, which was nice, because now you're talking about black glass basically, right?
Yeah.
Or a metal tin maybe.
I've looked into it actually and bought like some as testers, but they make it's similar to like this beer bottle here, amber colored glass that is light blocking, and it doesn't block all the light, of course, but it blocks a large percentage of it, and can't tell what color anything is inside. And I mean, the reason they put beer and stuff in those bottles is because it blocks the light to not degrade the beer. So I've looked into that, and I think that could be an option for flour packaging, is amber glass. That's or the compostable plastic, too.
It seemed like their reasoning was more like, oh, that if it's opaque, kids won't be able to see into it. Is there any harm in a kid seeing into a jar full of cannabis? Do you think?
I think it's not any different than a jar of anything else. If the kid is, I don't know what, I mean, a young kid, flowers really can't hurt you in their raw form. Even if you ate them, they're not decarboxylated and they don't taste very good, really. So honestly, I can't imagine any little kid biting one and liking it. Probably spit it out and not eat anymore. It's very bitter.
Yeah, I've tried it.
Yeah, so it's not very friendly. So you have to basically smoke it to decarboxylate it and inhale it that way. And so teenagers could, if you're talking about adolescent kids, that's when you're over the age of 10 or whatever, then that's when you start becoming a different age kid that might smoke it instead of just try to eat it or whatever. I don't know.
No, you guys don't have any kids, do you?
No.
I'm very curious about this issue because for so long we've heard the argument about kids, got to protect the kid. That's what it is every time. Sometimes I'll mix in one or two other things, but always the issue of kids. And I agree personally, like nobody wants kids smoking weed. Even I talked to Nick Matei and Derek Granai, and both of them said, I started smoking very young and I would not want that for my kids, which seems to fly in the face. A lot of people seem to think that a dispensary is going to open and kids are just going to have access to all this extra cannabis. Thoughts on that?
I wouldn't think so myself, and I'm basing that off of my own experience as an adolescent when I was in high school. When I was younger than middle school or a little bit younger than high school, I started hearing about kids smoking weed, but I wasn't really around it myself. And then when I was in high school, it was when I first got really introduced to it, and it was a lot easier to get weed than it was to get alcohol in high school. And it was totally illegal, back in that was like the early 2000s. And and so I don't know, I don't see how making it legalized. I mean, I don't think any retail store owners are going to be selling to minors. They're not going to, at that point, it may be somebody they sell to gives it to a minor, just like you could get alcohol that way back in the day or still can today. But there's only so much you can do about that. But there's no store owners who are going to be looking to sell to minors. And I don't think it would make a huge impact on, youth use. They're still going to, I just personally don't see it as a huge impact. But
one of my arguments was kids are already smoking. They're already using the stuff. I was smoking when I was 12. That's when we found it and we were like, this is great. They're already using it. So if the retail market opens, if your kid gets a hold of that, at least it's tested. At least he doesn't have to go buy it from some guy who might be selling any number of other things.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah, some of the stuff we smoked in high school was certainly questionable. I mean, I can remember some like stuff coated in white powder called, whatever, White Widow.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to get you all super high and,
that was mold.
Yeah, it's probably mold.
Look at the crystals, the mold crystal. Yeah, for sure. It was weird. Yeah. And you said you're from Connecticut. What was the herb like in Connecticut?
In high school, the best herb was the herb I could get. That was kind of what it was. Every once in a while, there was somebody had some better stuff, but then that was gone, and you got whatever you could at third period in the bathroom. So that's what I did, anyways.
No comment from me personally. We never did that. Yeah, I wanted to ask you a little bit. You mentioned about the Vermont Growers Association, and I talked to Jeff a while back, just on the phone briefly, and he was telling me about some of his advocacy. And I found an article here he wrote at vtcng.com, and I'd like to read your quote and get your reaction.
Okay.
You said, commodity farming is hard in Vermont, where every farm is a small farm, and many like mine are micro-sized operations operated by only one or two individuals. Cannabis could be an opportunity to keep small parcels and working lands in production here in our state. If direct access to consumers is available to small producers, it could be an opportunity for young people and those without access to large parcels of land to earn a living in a traditional working landscape.
Yep. So, I mean, I guess I feel like that's partially how I came to be a small landowner here, is cannabis from Northern California helped me. And I was someone that I just never felt like I had access to land in my life, until I got introduced to cannabis. And that was what made the dream kind of partially what happened for me. And you don't need a lot of space to do it for outdoors. You can make, that's part of why it's accessible to people who couldn't traditionally afford, large pieces of land or traditional farms, that might be large scale and worth a lot of money, because you can make it happen on a small piece. I mean, 125 plants tier 1, you're talking like a quarter of an acre. And I feel like that is accessible to someone who has a dream and wants to try to earn a living off their land. You can do it with cannabis. It's kind of because we're in this phase of history where it's becoming legal, and it's been illegal for so long. It's clearly something people want. There's a demand for it. And it's, something that you can do off a small piece, I think, for now, if the prices are okay. Indirect access to consumers would be a huge thing for small growers. Having a small stand where you could sell some of your own product, what you grew, could help buffer against the prices that are coming down the pike. I mean, when federal legalization happens, we're going to compete with the entire country, and you're going to have to brace for that, because I mean, that's what happened with CBD, and the prices weren't tanked, and so if you're not able to sell directly to a consumer then as a small grower, I don't know if you'll be able to keep up with wholesale pricing at that point, maybe.
That's a great point. Devin also mentioned earlier. I asked him about his thoughts on the big MSOs coming in, and he said he's actually not super worried about it right now, but he said when federal legalization hits, it's going to be a whole new ball game when they can just ship it across state lines to anywhere.
Yep, for sure.
What are your thoughts on the Curaleafs and the Slangs and these big dispensaries?
I don't really personally agree with them getting an unfavorable head start on starting the market, even though they did start the medical program. But we're going to have some large players in the market. It can't be all just small growers. And I guess in favor of some competition, and I don't want a level playing field, whether you're large or small. I guess, if it could be based on scale, and hopefully give everyone a chance to try to earn a living doing it, not necessarily get rich. I'm not looking to get rich myself, but if I could supplement my carpentry income, every year, and afford to build a nicer house or make some improvements on the property someday,
Well, and especially the outdoor, from the projections I've seen of the demand, we're going to need a lot of outdoor to make the extracts and all of that kind of stuff. So it would seem wise that maybe they should make it slightly easier for small outdoor guys to get going, since it seems like that is one thing that we're going to need a ton of.
Yeah. And they have done that. There's definitely, I mean, that was, I think, partially written in statute for tier 1 small cultivators to be given preference, along with the social equity applicants and stuff. And so tier 1 cultivation licenses have been given preference. They're starting on them first before they do the larger tiers.
And how last time I checked, they had approved a total of 1 license. Do you know if there's been more approved?
I haven't heard since that one. It seems like they meet on Mondays and make a lot of their announcements then. But yeah, they approved that one, and I hope they start approving more sooner. I did not apply as a social equity applicant myself, but I did apply as a tier 1. So I should be, I guess, next on the list behind the social equity and the integrated licenses.
Do they tell you where your application is in the queue?
No. But I did email them last week with a question about when I might expect to hear about the background check. and they responded by the end of the day with a response, written response. So that was nice.
And I know James talked about from a meeting, boy, maybe, I don't know, 2 months ago, 5, 6 weeks. I'm not sure exactly when. I was watching through all of them. He said they were having trouble getting the background check, the records back from the FBI.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah,
seemed
it's been hard.
concerning.
I think it's because it's Schedule 1, again, federally illegal. The FBI is not willing to work with a state, cannabis cultivation board when
So this is probably why they outsourced that.
I think they had to outsource it to
Okay.
somebody else. For that reason, they're sidestepping that, direct FBI thing. It's just like everybody else with trying to figure out how to operate a federally illegal business. They're trying to do a federally illegal arm of state government,
Yeah, and it's definitely got to be tricky. Although, it's let me back up a little bit. So these delays, this was supposed to start happening May 1st. They were supposed to start handing out licenses. And I know a lot of outdoor growers have called in with comments about, hey, you said we were going to be good to go now, and we're not, and we want to get our plants in the ground, and we're worried that we're going to miss out on a whole growing season. How has the delay affected your business plans at all?
Well, it certainly has affected my decision to try to. Well, I mean, it honestly hasn't, as far as everything I've been doing to prep to get licensed. But it's delayed I'm starting to wonder whether I should actually start making holes in my field and working on that. I've already bought compost, but yeah, it's the season is so short here that you have to take advantage of every single day. You really do. And so any delays from here on out are definitely going to impact the yields directly of any outdoor cultivator. There's no question about that.
And I would imagine for some folks who are gearing up for this, they might have already invested a nice little chunk of change preparing for this, and are now kind of just hanging in limbo, wondering how they're going to make money.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just as a tier 1 outdoor cultivator, the only thing you really can try to negotiate on is insurance, price wise. But as far as the required kind of bureaucratic things that go into getting a license, it's application fees, license fee, insurance, just before you even start putting plants in the ground. And that's that's $5,000 for a tier 1 license just for that stuff. And it's definitely, and then you got all your other expenses that you typically would pay for, as far as compost, fertilizer, maybe some help, just
help would be good.
if you can afford that, it's always nice.
What about transporting? How are you allowed to take cannabis from an outdoor grow to a wholesaler, or how do you have to transport it?
As far as I know, and I think I read through that section along probably in like March or something, and who knows if it was even the final version, but as far as I remember and know, you're allowed to transport your own crop as a cultivator, and a wholesaler is also allowed to transport crop that they've purchased. So you could either have a wholesaler come to your place and buy it off you, or you could take it somewhere else and sell it to a retailer or a wholesaler or whatever yourself, But
in a way, though, say a wholesaler came to your house and bought 20 pounds off you, in a way, isn't that sort of direct to the consumer? I mean, the wholesaler in essence is sort of a consumer as well.
Yeah, it's just not as they're talking about, like on a supply chain level, there's a consumer being the end user, the wholesaler being someone who purchases to resell.
Sure.
So,
Well, yeah, and that's like the dictionary definition, but I'm like, they're also, some of them wholesalers probably getting high.
Well, yeah, and definitely, and they're still a customer. I mean,
Sure.
their customers, no doubt. As a cultivator, a good wholesaler is a relationship that everybody wants and seeks to have, because that's how you're going to survive. But yeah, they're not the consumers as far as, yeah, they might dabble a little and test it, sample it, but they're not going to be, nobody buys 20 pounds to go for their head stash, you know?
Well, yeah, that was just the first number I pulled out.
Yeah.
Listen, we got 3 minutes left on this, and I forgot to ask about the banking and the insurance. Do you have another half hour here?
I do have to start. I could do like another 15 minutes. I could do those two.
All right, cool. I'm going to cut it then, and we're going to come right back. Beautiful.
All right.
Thanks a lot, man.
Yep.